pace has dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It's a Friday. It's June 5th. It's kind of sort of starting to feel like a Friday, kind of, I guess. We've got soccer coming back, and we've got some pretty rough dates on a lot of leagues in this country on what's about to happen. We don't have a firm date with MLS yet, but we know more about the plan, and we'll get into that. USL has a rough date of July 11th for USL Championship. USL League One, is that part of July 11th, or are there still some questions there?
Still some questions. Haven't heard anything about League One.
All right, so we'll see about that. NISA has a plan for the fall. We'll talk about that. Also, updates from around the world because we've got them from a variety of countries. Portugal returned to play yesterday, and there's some controversy about that. We'll get into all of it this morning. We've got tactics questions that are carrying over from yesterday. We've got other questions carrying over from yesterday. It is going to be a busy show. So thanks for hanging out with us. John, where do you want to start?
Well, why don't we start with the good news about MLS?
Well, I mean, we know what the good news was. We talked about it the last 2 days. Where do you want to start with MLS? Because we know the good news.
Well, obviously locally, Atlanta United back at it. And the news about the winner for Orlando I thought was interesting.
Well, it's not news yet. Let's be clear. It is being reported as such, and I'll be curious to see how it works out. The winner of the Orlando tournament, remember, the group stage games, or whatever you want to call them, will be part of the regular season. The knockout portion of it will not be. There's been talk about $1 million prize. We don't know if that is a purse to be spread among a certain number of teams, if that's all going to one team. We don't know that yet either. But also yesterday, being reported by Pablo, there is talk about the winner of this tournament earning a CONCACAF Champions League berth. Now, my gut feeling, because everybody's assumed that would come from the Open Cup, that's got to be a U.S. soccer decision. And they could be on board with it. We don't know. What happens if a Canadian team wins it? Then you have to replace the Voyageurs Cup, which probably isn't going to get played either. So then that becomes a Canadian Soccer Association question. Could this be basically tied to the Supporter Shield winner? Because it's not like the Supporter Shield is going to mean what it usually does with this. The question would still remain about the Canadian winner and how that would look. But maybe there's updates that just haven't been officially announced yet about the Voyageurs Cup or the Canadian Championship, I think is what it's officially called now, and the U.S. Open Cup, because both have Champions League spots tied to them. Both are unlikely. I'd say both are impossible to be completed in their current formats. We've not heard alternative formats yet, and both are becoming more and more unlikely to be played in 2020. So is it maybe just a little bit of all of the above in a combination of things working with MLS to where the winner of this tournament gets a berth, period? If it's a Canadian team, they take the Voyageurs Cup berth, and then Canada doesn't have to worry about everything. And yes, Canadian Premier League teams will stomp their feet and be upset about it, but let's be realistic here. Right now, we don't even know what they're going to do yet, let alone can they beat MLS teams in a competition. It's not very likely on a regular basis. Again, we don't know how it would have played out, but this is 2020. This is a year we don't know how anything's going to play out. So we're figuring it out as we go. On the American front, it could replace the Supporter Shield winner. And that might be the way to go this year, is have of the MLS berths, which you have 4, or the American berths, you have 4. One is Open Cup. We'll see what we do with that. Put that to the side for a second. One is MLS Cup winner. That's going to happen. You'll have an MLS Cup winner. One is the Supporter Shield winner. The other is the other top conference winner in the regular season. The regular season is not going to be what a typical regular season is. So do you maybe start to move things around to where the MLS Cup winner, the MLS Cup runner-up, get berths, and then the winner of the Orlando tournament gets a berth, and then you've got to figure out the Open Cup one. And the Open Cup one, if the USL Championship is going to come back, then maybe there is the opportunity to at least do something. If it is taking top finishers from last year, if it is taking a certain number of USL championship teams and a certain number of MLS teams who want to opt into it and play these games on top of a crowded schedule, maybe that's up for grabs. We don't know yet. So stay tuned, but it's not as simple as MLS unless they're just going to replace the Supporter Shield winner with this. That's what they control. If they say that this is what we're going to do, instead of a Supporter Shield winner going to Champions League, it's the winner of this Orlando tournament going to Champions League. That doesn't need any other debate. That's an easy decision. I think U.S. Soccer has to sign off on it, but that's an easy one. When you get into the Open Cup and the Canadian Championship spots, it becomes a different conversation because you're including other entities that have nothing to do with the Orlando tournament. So stay tuned. It's being reported as such. It would make sense. It had been rumored all along the way. We'll see how it gets done in actuality.
Yeah, and those were the questions that I had were Open Cup, possibility of which one gets swapped out for the Orlando winner and the Canadian winner. So those were the questions that I had going in as to how this might be addressed.
We'll have to see what they do. There's no way to know as of yet, so we will see how they handle this. My gut feeling is it's the Supporter Shield. That's my gut feeling, is the Supporter Shield winner is replaced by this one. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out.
And there was also a piece of news yesterday out of Philadelphia that possibly an athlete in another sport might be getting a piece of the action of the Union, which I thought was interesting.
Well, it's not that interesting because he's been trying to buy DC United, or at least part of DC United, multiple times, and he hasn't been able to get a deal done. He's from the DC area, but he's going up to Philly, Kevin Durant, to buy a minority stake in the Philadelphia Union. Nobody's commenting on it yet. We don't know exactly how big of a stake or what the valuation is going to be, which will be very interesting to find out. But Kevin Durant's been trying to buy into MLS for a little while. There's been multiple attempts with DC United, which is his hometown team. Haven't been able to come to a deal. So he's moved up the road to Philadelphia, and he's going to be part of the Union's ownership. And we've talked about the Union's ownership. They've needed more investment. They've needed more money to work with. They got it now. And that's going to be a big help for the Union in the short term for sure, where you're dealing with a cash flow issue because you don't have revenue coming in. This is going to help alleviate some of that, and it's a big move at a critical time for the Union.
Yeah, and the notion, and we've had folks on the timeline who wanted to ask about Durant being a part owner in an MLS team because, and the surprise was that he hadn't been able to get involved in DC United. So that was the thought on the timeline. Was that,
I mean,
he tried.
Yeah, you can't really say it's surprising because, I mean, then you're telling people who own something, well, why haven't you sold it? Why haven't you sold some of it? Why haven't you given some of this up? Maybe the offer wasn't good enough. There's no way to know. Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe they want to own all of it themselves. That's part of the deal here. So I like that Durant didn't just keep banging his head against the wall, and he wants to invest, and he sees MLS as a good investment. And I think when you look at how this has went down, he sees soccer and Major League Soccer as a good investment, even more than just supporting his hometown team because he wasn't able to buy into that team. He's moved to a different team to buy into. So that shows you what he's thinking, what his advisors are thinking about the quality of this investment. And that's a big deal. So that's a good sign for MLS, where you have James Harden now buying into the Houston Dynamo and Houston Dash, and now you have Kevin Durant with the Philadelphia Union. You have other celebrity athlete partial owners around the league, Russell Wilson in Seattle, the LAFC ownership group, which has quite a few. You've got that, and this is another one to add to the list. That helps raise the profile of Major League Soccer. It's another one of those things that we talked about it yesterday for a long time. Right now, where MLS does have an opportunity to get out in front of people because there's not other games happening right this second. MLS will be the first men's professional league to get back on the field. They have to take advantage of that, but this is another news item to get out there on an ESPN, to get out there into the local sports medias, and to get positive publicity about this league and its growth potential.
Jonathan Tannenwald's piece in the Philadelphia Inquirer Union. Spokesperson for the team declined comment. Spokesperson for Durant's investment company, 35 Ventures, declined comment. And remember, Durant and 35 Ventures reps met with members of the union ownership group back in December, back at the team's offices in Chester, PA. What else domestically did you want to tackle? Anything?
Yeah, you don't make a purchase deal of whatever percentage it's going to be on a whim. So the fact they met in December, I'm not surprised. In MLS, we have a return to full team training after some things happen, and this is an important discussion. It's not just as simple as, okay, now you can just do what you want. There are multiple steps that have to happen before teams can train fully. But MLS yesterday lifted the team training moratorium. So now teams can start meeting that approval. You have to submit plans to do it. And those plans have to meet the standards of the local jurisdiction, the state jurisdiction, and the league's protocols. That's not something that can happen overnight. That's something that you've got to work through to get done. Here's what we have from MLS. In addition to that, a strict schedule of COVID-19 testing is also required. Full team training is now mandatory. It's not a voluntary situation. It's part of your contract. That's become a question in some of the post-discussion of the CBA getting done. We'll continue that conversation as we go as well. But this is now the season. Once you get back to full training, it is your season, and it's down to your contract, and you're fulfilling the terms of your contract. It's not a voluntary situation anymore. As MLS said, as Don Garber said when this was announced previously about the agreement, now if you're going to opt out, there has to be an approval process. There has to be a valid reason. You can't just say, I don't want to play. And the other side of that, and I think maybe it's been swept under the rug in some of this conversation, is the players have signed off on that, first off. And the players wouldn't sign off on that if they weren't completely comfortable with the safety protocols, with the steps, with what is out there. And look, we know we've heard some of the players, we've heard Jeff Larinowitz here in Atlanta talk about how there were still some things to work through. But you don't sign off on the safety of it and say it's a mandate and not voluntary like it is in the NWSL if you're not comfortable with putting your players in that situation. That has to be understood. Here's what we have to do to get back to team training. Players must complete a physical. All players and staff must have 2 PCR tests, which is a COVID-19 test, 24 hours apart, 72 hours prior to the start of team training. They also have to undergo 1 baseline antibody test. So 2 tests 24 hours apart in the 72 hours prior to the start of team training. That's becoming a standard. That was not what was in place in Europe at the very beginning. It's becoming a standard protocol now for any group that is trying to get back to any kind of activity where you're not social distancing. Not just 1 test to come back. 2 tests 24 hours apart in that 72-hour period before you come back. That is doing as much as possible to eliminate the possibility of a false test. As we heard from the group that's doing the Premier League testing, 2 false tests in that short of a period of time, the odds are like 7,000 to 1. Can it happen? Yeah, anything can happen, as we've learned this year. But it's not likely, and it is another safety as close to a guarantee as you're going to get right now. All right, so after they've done those things, 2 negative PCR tests, the serology test, the physical, they're cleared to come back to train. Players, coaches, and staff must complete PCR tests every other day. That's critical, and nobody's talking about it. And it's an important element here because, 1, it costs more. Flat out. That's another day of testing each week that you're doing. Some weeks it's 2 because it's every other day. In a 14-day period, in a 2-week period, you're doing 7 tests. In Germany, in England, in Spain, in Italy, 2 tests a week. In a 14-day period, you're doing 4 tests. That's a big difference. That's a costly difference. And that has to be understood here. MLS is not just doing the level of testing that we've talked about that is going to be anywhere between $5,000 and $6,000 a week. They're adding more on top of that. That's a lot. It's also going to give more of a guarantee of safety. And that's an important element here. Now, from what we've been able to tell, when the teams are in Orlando, this testing will be provided by Major League Soccer. When they are in their home markets, it is on the teams to do it. And that's how it is in England. That's how it is around the world. The league is not putting up money for testing. The only place I have heard that an outside agency is paying for testing is in Ecuador, where the federation is doing that for the top 2 divisions. Outside of that, it's on the clubs. And that's why you're seeing some smaller clubs say, we can't afford to do this. And that's why they're not doing it. And that's why they're not playing. The serology testing, once every 3 months. That's for antibodies. The individual club tests have to be authorized by the FDA, Health Canada, basic stuff about making sure they're not just fly-by-night testing. Turnaround time for tests must be no more than 24 hours. So they're not going to have, if you're going to do tests every other day, you can't have tests that take 72 hours to get a result. So you're going to have to do that level of testing. I have not compared prices, but I'm assuming that to get that quick of a turnaround, you're paying a little bit more to do it. Mo money, mo money, mo money. If you have a player or staff member test positive, that individual is isolated. They're tested again at least 24 hours later to ensure the test was not a false positive. All close contacts immediately tested. Contact tracing performed at the discretion of the club's COVID-19 task force. That's another element that clubs have to create. And local authorities will be involved in contact tracing as well. The player or staff member who tests positive can return to training only when cleared by the club's chief medical officer in consultation with the league medical team. My question would be, what standards have to be met for that clearance? Is it 2 negative tests? That's been pretty typical in most places we've seen. Is that what it's going to be here? Is it 1 negative test? What is it? That would be helpful. But you have multiple people that are signing off on this return to play. And just connecting the dots. Yeah, I have a question about that element. But if you're going to the extra expense of all this testing, you are doing a higher level of testing to get results back quicker. I don't think you're going to cheap out on this part. Like, it doesn't make sense that this is where you're going to cheap out on the part where people have tested positive and coming back.
Yeah.
I think it's logical that there is a pretty stringent approval process in coming back. Any player or staff considered to be in a high-risk category for severe illness related to COVID-19 will not be permitted to participate in team training unless cleared by the club's chief medical officer. That's going to be an interesting one with some coaches, some staff members. You know, it's been a conversation that's come up in the NBA over the last 24 hours is, are you going to see some coaches be allowed to coach? Are they going to be allowed to be on the sideline? Could be age, could be other health issues that are putting them in that high-risk category. We'll see how MLS handles that, but there is an approval process for anybody who would be considered high risk. I'm assuming the physicals have something to do with that, and I don't know what else. The facilities and equipment use, this is not quite as important to us, but I'll run through it real quick. You've got full use of your training facility. Entry points should remain open instead of doors open and shutting. The training room, gym, fitness area, no more than 5 individuals at any time, and maintain physical distancing in those areas. Use multiple dressing rooms. Assign players to the same dressing room for each training session, so they're in a group. Individual lockers spaced away. Atlanta United has multiple dressing rooms at the training facility, so they're able to do this rather easily. I don't know what teams wouldn't be able to. It's going to be a team-by-team thing. You have to have all the cleaning, the sanitizing, the disinfecting after every session. Equipment and laundry has to be cleaned and disinfected after each use. Individual hydration bottles, no communal water, no hydration devices, and only individual prepackaged meals and individually wrapped utensils may be provided to players and staff for meals. and you have to remain 10 feet apart while eating. Again, as we've had these conversations come up, there's a couple things to keep in mind. Everybody is being tested, so the immediate question, and I had it too at the beginning of all this, is then why are you so worried about physical distancing in a locker room, at a cafeteria setting, those kinds of things? But studies do show, and you're erring very strongly on the side of caution right now, studies do show that if you are around somebody for a longer period of time, you are at higher risk of contracting COVID-19. So if you, in a soccer match, run by somebody or mark somebody on a corner kick, low risk. If you are sitting eating with somebody for 45 minutes, higher risk. And those are the things that they are making sure to eliminate as much risk as possible. And again, they're paying a lot of money to try to do that, so they're going to be as careful as they can. You have to have an emergency action plan for all related issues to COVID-19. Essential staff only for training. Specific staff is listed in that individual club plan. You can't just have somebody new show up out of the blue. You can't have people who aren't on that plan show up. A lot of different things are going into this. A lot of different things are going into this. A lot of the other protocols are the same as they are now. This is not going to come cheap. This is not going to come easy. And now teams have to create these plans, get the approvals, get the testing done, and you can move on to full team training.
And what you see here is, this plan, as you were going through it, it is not a short piece of paper. And there are a lot of different aspects that have to be looked at, a lot of different aspects that have to be addressed, a lot of different variables that have to be covered. And you see what MLS is trying to do to make sure that they are as safe as possible to get out there and have a product for their fans. And I commend them for all of this care that they're putting into it. And the one thing that stood out to me, and we talked about it yesterday when all this stuff was coming online, is the testing, the number of individual tests that are happening. Twice the number that we're seeing in Europe out of the blocks is what we're seeing with MLS. And that just amplifies the amount of care that they're thinking to make sure that there's a product out there and that their athletes and personnel are as safe as possible. To me, it was that testing number that just popped out to me off the top.
Yeah, that immediately jumped out to me. I mean, when you hear in the last few weeks the Southeastern Conference for football is talking about not doing regular testing and only testing when somebody shows symptoms, and you hear Major League Soccer say, we're doing every other day testing, which is more than any other league that is coming back or back right now, that's significant. That is a very significant element. And look, I know a lot of people have questioned MLS during all of this process, but that's a huge commitment of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just over a month, if we're talking, let's say $6,000 a week, which has been a going rate in England, converting pounds to dollars, you're talking in 4 weeks' time, that's $24,000, and that's just the testing element.
Mm-hmm.
That is for, eight sets of tests in 4 weeks? In 4 weeks, MLS is doing 14 tests, almost double in a month, on top of all the other elements of it that they have that are going to be costly either way. So it's a big deal, and I'm glad that they're doing it in such a strong way because it is going to provide more safety to the players and staff that are involved. I'll be curious to see if the referees are on that same kind of level of protocol or if maybe it's a little bit different, how that's going to look. We haven't heard that element yet. It's going to involve U.S. Soccer. I'll be curious to see what USL does. And USL has the plan on paper for July 11th as a return for USL. They were shy about announcing that either, and I don't know what their plans are in these regards. Because even the standard 2 times a week, that's going to be a cost that I don't know if USL Championship teams can necessarily meet on a regular basis. If you're going to this level of testing, I don't think USL Championship teams can do it. And then you start comparing, and then you're like, well, why is one doing this and why is another doing this? Money. It's that simple. But USL is planning on coming back in team venues. They're not going to do the hub idea. That's another critical element to it. And we will see. NISA announced their plan to come back in the fall, and they're trying to figure out what exactly that looks like. It's not a simple thing for them, as we've said. The lower down the pyramid you go, the costs are still there to do it safely, but you're dealing with less money to work with initially. So for NISA, which is third division alongside USL League One, regionalized competition in August, 2 conferences, East and West, and then a single location tournament in late October, the conclusion of regionalized competition to have a fall champion. Pretty short, which makes sense, again, if you're talking about the costs at this level. These are clubs who are not built to handle 6 figures of safety costs coming in on top of the cost of operating, and probably at a minimum reducing whatever they could make on a game day. So it's going to be difficult for them, but they do have a plan to try to come back. A little bit more on USL Championship real quick. Louisville City, Brad Estes made a statement, and it was the basic stuff. They still have to work with their Players Association, and Estes mentioned that. He's the president of Lou City, and he said they have to work with their state and local governments. They have submitted a plan to their governor's office in Kentucky for returning without fans. That's what a club spokesman said to the Louisville Courier-Journal. So you're starting to get some updates on that side. The lower divisions is going to be a lot harder. MLS is committing a lot of resources to do this. It's as safe of a plan as you have in any sport. It's the safest that I've seen in terms of that much testing. I have not seen a better one. So now you've got to do all the things in conjunction with that. You have a positive test, handle it correctly. As we saw in Dallas, there was a massive freak out. At least I saw maybe an attempt for a massive freak out, let's put it that way. And the testing in Dallas worked exactly like it should. You identified a player who was positive. You've pushed them from the group for now. You're going to retest them. You're going to make sure they're going to go when they come back. You're going to contact trace. You're going to test everybody else. You're going to make sure that it's an isolated case. And you're going to move forward. And that's what we've seen in every other league in the world that has started testing. There's nothing weird about it. There's nothing shocking about it. There's nothing upsetting about it. As Jurgen Klopp said yesterday about Liverpool, these players and staff members are human beings. They got to go to the store. They've got to put gas in their car. They've got to do things that put them at risk. They need to limit that risk as much as possible so you don't have a bunch of these. But everything you do outside of your, protective bubble that you have is risk. And that means you're going to have some people who test positive. But then you've got to identify them as quick as possible and isolate them so it doesn't spread. And as we just said earlier about activity, just because one player in a team tests positive, the nature of athletic competition does not mean that every other player in that team is going to test positive. That player might not be around anybody for more than a 2-minute span of time all day long. They might not have the opportunity to spread it to everybody else. That's reality too. So you have to, this is difficult, and it's something that we've really tried hard to understand as best we can, not being scientists, not being doctors. And I feel like it's very important to explain all of these particulars in at least a decent level of detail, so we know what players are getting into, what teams are getting into, what staff members are getting into, what to look for when these conversations happen, because it's easy to be afraid of this. I think we all have been at some point during it. But the more you know, the more you can protect yourself and the more you can protect others. And that's the important elements here. So I feel like MLS's plan is a very protective, safe plan. And they've created a lot of fail-safes for any breakdowns in it to not allow it to spread within a team in a wide margin.
Covers came in this morning and had a thought on Twitter, and he wanted to know why MLS was having teams submit their plans for training instead of having a league-wide protocol.
Yeah, I responded to it.
Okay. And guessing it was different guidelines.
No, I responded to it. It's you have to satisfy the needs of your local government too. It's just the same as in Germany. I mean, in Germany, it's not a league-wide guideline, as we saw with Dynamo Dresden. The local health department said, no, they have to do a quarantine. And the league can't overrule local government. It's the same here. So you have to get those sign-offs on those. And, yeah, they are going to vary state to state, location to location, city to city. It's not as simple as saying MLS is above the law. No, they're not. They have to meet the standards of the local governments. And that's something that the NFL is going to have to do. That's something that the NBA is going to have to do. It's something everybody's going to have to do because that's part of the discussion, you know. And if you're going to play games in your local markets too, once you look at that next level, it's going to be different place to place. You're going to have some parts of the country that will have fans in venues in August. It's going to happen. And you're going to have some parts of the country that will not have fans in the stands, maybe in October. We don't know. But it's not going to be across the board because that's not how this virus is spread across the country, across the board. So that doesn't even make sense. You have to do what each local area needs you to do. And that's what this process would be. It's not a singular process. There's a lot of different agencies you have to involve.
All right, before we head overseas, do you want my tactics question and Tom Russo's question came in from Twitter?
Well, let's get Tom Russo's question first because it's not tactics.
Okay. Tom Russo, he says, just for fun, a statistical analysis, current World League ranking. And so he listed his and wanted to know what your thoughts were.
All right, what's his?
Number 12, MLS.
Okay.
Number 11, the championship, Skybet Championship.
Okay.
7 through 10, some order of Belgium, Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina.
Okay.
Number 6, the Netherlands.
Okay.
Number 5, France.
Uh-huh.
3, a tie on either or for 3 and 4 with Spain and Italy.
Yeah.
Number 2, Germany. Number 1, England.
Top 5's fine. Beyond that, it's a crapshoot. It's an absolute, especially coming out of this. I don't think the Netherlands is a guaranteed 6. It's very top-heavy. Belgium is even more top-heavy. I do not think Belgium is a better league than Major League Soccer at all. I completely disagree with that. When you see players go back and forth, you're not seeing a player who is, outstanding here be average there. You're not seeing a player who's outstanding there come here and be average. It's pretty similar. I think MLS has a little bit of a boost. I mean, it's hard to compare individual player to individual player, and there's not a ton to go on like that. You've got some players who have had success in both. You've had some players who've had more success in one or the other. I think MLS top to bottom is a better league than Belgium. I think MLS top to bottom is a better league than Argentina. Argentina produces great talent, but the Argentine league isn't able to hold on to it very much. Boca, River, Independiente, Racing, your top half. Well, your top 2, Boca and River, class above. They're 2 of the best teams in this hemisphere. Beyond that, you're talking about top teams with Mexico, with Brazil, et cetera, et cetera. And then the bottom half of Argentina, MLS is better than. So I don't think MLS is worse than Argentina as a whole. And that's the question, is how you're deciding this. Are you deciding based off the best team, or you deciding on the top to bottom? Because MLS has a strong top to bottom because of the way it's structured. It's not built for a team to run away from everybody. Mexico, you have to put ahead of MLS because in competition, they beat them. Brazil, you have to put ahead of Mexico. Mexico, Argentina, that's where it gets interesting because it's a little bit harder to compare now because you're not seeing Mexican teams in the Copa Libertadores. So you don't have that direct competition. I do not think the championship is better than MLS either. I disagree with that. I think top to bottom, there's bad teams in the championship that would be bad teams in MLS. And I think your top teams in MLS would win the championship. I do. I think, and I know people disagree with it, and it's completely fine. We're never going to know the answers. I think if you took away the salary cap because you have it here and you don't have it in others, but you took an Atlanta, you took an LAFC, you took a Toronto, you took a Seattle, you took the top 4 teams from last year, and you put them in the championship and you gave them resources to add on to what they have in a fair way, because they're going to have to deepen their roster to play in the championship, I think they would all be in contention for promotion. I do. And I think if you put them in the Premier League, I don't think any of them would be a guarantee to get relegated. I think they could hold their own. Again, you're going to have to give them the opportunity to spend like other teams around them spend. And those are teams who could spend in that way, at least closer to that way. So I disagree the championship is better completely. So that means I'm disagreeing with the championship and Belgium being definitively above MLS. And I'm probably disagreeing that Argentina is too. So that means, just doing the math, that would mean I'd put MLS in the 9 spot. But honestly, 6 through 12, I don't know what it looks like coming out of this. If you want my opinion about coming out of all this, I think MLS could go as high as 5. It's not a definite, but I think they could, because they're going to handle this coronavirus stoppage, the financial issues, better than most leagues in the world, I think. And that's going to help them. So they could go higher, but I'll put them 9 for now, and that's it's 6 through 12. We're throwing them up in the air, and we have our personal biases, and that's what it is. I don't think it's easy to define.
Tafka and Shiva have questions about the relationship between MLS and the MLSPA.
Okay.
Tafka says, am I the only one thinking that the, quote, damaged relationship, end quote, between MLS and MLSPA is being a tad overblown? Yes, they threatened lockout, which was stupid, but they backed off and gave the last details to the players within 48 hours. Doubt it matters much in 2026.
I think it's being overblown as well. I think right now it's raw. I think right now players are upset about thinking that a move was being made to affect their health care. And the article from Paul Tenorio yesterday went into a little more detail on everything, and the league has said that they would not have affected anybody's health care during a lockout. The players didn't think that was the case. So if it's miscommunication, it's miscommunication. I understand the anger from the players on that. I understand the anger right now just at the threat of a lockout, period. That's right now. I think long term, this is not going to be as bad as it feels like. The flames are being fanned up, and it's like, I don't think that accomplishes anything right now. There's raw feelings because people are worried, freaked out, got more freaked out, don't know what the future's going to look like. Everybody's feeling that right now. So something happens and we get upset. And people ask you about it, you're going to tell them you get upset. I think it will die down. I do think the league needs to be very intentional in rebuilding the relationship right now, though, because you don't want anything to fester. You don't want anything to continue and get worse because, look, people are going to keep asking. And the more, it's just like anything, if something bad happens to you and everybody asks you, man, that was really bad. That really sucked. That person was a jerk. Yeah, they were a jerk. Yeah. And you keep talking it up. That doesn't help you. And people are going to keep asking because it's a story. The league needs to be very intentional in working with the players to mitigate the damage of this. That is undeniable to me. But yes, I think long term, because I do believe the league will do that, and I believe that this is a now problem, not a long-term problem, that I don't think that relationship is fractured forever. I think it's something that the league will work to repair, and it's something that will die down.
And that response that you just gave leads into what Shiva was asking as well. She wanted to know what the thoughts were on the relationship between the players and the league based on Jeff and Alec Cann's interviews yesterday. She says it seemed the lockout threat left a sour taste in their mouth.
Yeah, and that's my Coke Energy opening up right now. It's not time
for
beer
not the watermelon.
I don't have one. It's that simple. I don't have an unlimited supply. Unless Red Bull wants to send them to me, I don't have them.
Put a sponsorship icon in one of the corners.
Yeah, I'll do it. But I don't have one, so I'm drinking a Cherry Coke Energy. The players who were on a mic yesterday, and I kind of wonder if that was part of the agreement, was that players were going to be given an opportunity to talk about it. Because if you go back and look at Atlanta United's tweet with the video from Alec Cann, It was mentioned, CBA negotiations. Like, they didn't hide from it. They didn't try to, like, bury the lead. It was part of the conversation, the questions that were asked. And, again, there weren't media there. It was team staff asking. And that's, I think, another sign that, yeah, people are going to be allowed to talk through this and get it out of their system a little bit. But you still have to fix the relationship. I think it's going to end up being okay. It's not a Major League Baseball situation at all. It's not in this country. I think it is going to end up being okay. I really do. But the league does have some work to do.
A couple of other questions, non-tactics related, and if anybody has a tactics question, send it in. That's what we're here for on the timeline. Joe Johnstone, who is probably watching us both on the big screen this morning.
Yes, I've already seen it.
Thoughts on how Atlanta United handled the remainder of the season based on the credits and freezing of season ticket holder rates? It's what I expected the club. That's what I expected the club to do today. At least we're not Sunderland at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, do any of these teams want to cut a check right now? No, you have no revenue. I know. I think we kind of have this idea that we look at a team, and maybe I do think it's different in this country than it is in other countries, but we look at a team as this monolithic, big box store or something that doesn't deal with reality. Well, the reality is they have no revenue, and MLS teams expected to have revenue right now from games in March, games in April, games in May. And those didn't happen. So you are not in a good place right now financially. And teams are trying to figure out how to make the bills work, how to make payroll work, all these different elements to it. So it's not an easy situation. I think it does need to be understood that teams do not want to cut checks at the moment. I do think you need to have that opportunity available for people who do need a check cut because their situation has changed on a season ticket holder. Because it's about a long-term relationship. Are you going to lose potentially some casual season ticket holders who are not there for the long term, who maybe this was the first year they bought in because they had been to a game and they liked it and they had the opportunity? Sure. And they might not come back immediately. I think your hardcore fans who are going to be there year after year are going to roll it over and be fine. I think people who have an individual issue where they need money now but are going to support the team later, those are the ones you want to do the right thing by. And if that means a refund now and they have an opportunity to hold their spot with some level of a deposit or something or other and they have time to pay that later, I think you can figure that out on an individual basis. That's not something you can put out in a press release. That's not something you can put out as a blanket policy. But you have the possibility to make this clear to people that we're here for you. We want you to be with us. We need your support right now. And MLS teams are reluctant to say the things that Aberdeen has said and other teams have said because that's not the perception of pro sports here. It's not acceptable to come out and say, we're in financial trouble. I don't think MLS teams are in financial trouble of going out of business, but they're in financial trouble. I mean, the revenues are gone right now, and they might not be coming back anytime soon. So you want to find the way to do it where you meet your needs, you meet your supporters' needs, and you solve problems as they come up. I think the statement that Atlanta made is the fair one. I think that's the best way to go. But that doesn't work in a press release. That doesn't work in a team statement. That is the way you do it. You send it out to your season ticket holders and you make it clear, we want this, we're offering this, we're hoping for this, but if you need something, talk to your rep. We will figure this out.
Yeah, the conversations that I had with season ticket holders yesterday, they rolled them over. They're the hardcores and absolutely just rolled it over into next season.
Yeah, and that's what people are going to do because you want to hold your spot. Some people won't have the means to do that right now, and they need to have a way to be handled as well and also try to keep their support in the long term.
No question. Tafka's question that he held from yesterday to reissue today.
Okay.
And it's a TV production question.
Okay.
He says he'd like to see the use of some other camera angles during live play of matches, especially an overhead from the end line and following up the field. Also, sideline close-up plays. You think that's possible? You think it'd be successful?
Yeah.
And he also thought it would be intriguing. He says, obviously not whole matches, but use it intelligently. Tafka thinks it could be a great tool. So much of the speed of the game and the intricacy of play is lost with the side distance view.
Sideline close on the ground, yes. Sideline up higher, yes, I think. The overhead in Orlando is probably not going to work because the facilities aren't built for that. Once you get back into venues, you can do that more. We've seen it at special events for MLS. It's not a cheap camera to use.
No.
But it can be done, and we've seen it occasionally. Will you see it in closed-door games? Maybe, possibly. But in Orlando, I don't think you can set that up on the fields they're going to be using. I just don't think it's possible. But they are talking about a lot of creative ways to handle this. Alex Silverman at Morning Consult wrote a piece that ESPN's going to produce everything. They are going to provide clean feeds of games to Fox and to Univision for their broadcasts. So there will be games on non-ESPN networks, but ESPN staff are producing it all. It's to limit, personnel on site. It's to manage these things from a COVID-19 perspective. Fox and Univision TUDN matches will provide their own commentary, their own branded graphics on top of it. Those will be handled at their respective outposts, kind of like we talked about with the Bundesliga, where a raw feed is coming out of Germany and BT has people at home producing it with their setup at home to do it. And then in another home, the announcers are there and they're getting the feed and they're talking about it. So you'll see something along those lines with Fox and Univision TUDN. Right now, we don't know here what the economic impact will be on those rights fees. It's around $90 million a year coming from all of those partners to MLS. Are they going to be able to broadcast all of the games they are set to broadcast? We don't know yet. There's no way to know. So are they going to ask for a refund? We don't know yet. Are they going to ask for more games next year? Maybe. We don't know these things yet because we don't know what the rest of the season looks like. And it does sound, just a little clarification, it does sound like there's a misunderstanding of some sort from what Jeff Larentowicz said yesterday about only 9 more games after this to the idea that Jacob Myers had reported in the Columbus Dispatch of 18 games, 9 at home, 9 away. There's a disconnect somewhere because connecting the dots on what a lot of different people have said, there was always going to be more than 9, and 18 has been reported from different people and different folks talking about it. So I think that's going to be the number. I think it was 9 at home, 9 away was where the 9 number came from. Look, everybody's riled up and probably exhausted from negotiating all this stuff out. So I don't think there was anything, any ill intent behind it. I think it just happened. And there you go.
We're officially caught up on Twitter, sir.
Well, we've got Mike Conti joining in about 10 minutes. We had a question on the board from the Krups, and this is part of Alex's birthday week, asking about tactics in the Bundesliga. And there was a really good piece from Jonathan Wilson in The Guardian, and Jonathan Wilson's a great writer to read about tactics, the history of it, how things are evolving in modern times. It's a really good piece over there talking about big picture of where Germany is right now. It's all flipped in, about 20 years in Germany. Wilson talks about how on TV there was, they do a pretty detailed, I can't remember the name of the show in Germany. If our friend Johannes is listening, he might know what show I'm talking about. It's a show where they'll bring coaches on, and they'll go pretty deep dive soccer nerd on you. And at the time, the Hoffenheim manager was Ralf Rangnick, who is known for the Red Bull pressing style, now RB Leipzig, but the Red Bull pressing style that we see here in New York, too. He was explaining zonal marking on there, and he was just completely dismissed and laughed at. Everybody in Germany at that time, and this is early 2000s, they were in the World Cup final in 2002 and lost to Brazil. It was all about character. It was all about fight. It was all about never giving up. It was those elements of the game. Well, as it changed with Klinsmann and Yogi Löw, and on a tactical side, a lot more of Yogi Löw than Klinsmann. Klinsmann was the motivator. Yogi Löw put together the plan. That was limited because it's a national team. It's not like a club team in terms of a deeper level of tactics. Jurgen Klopp started to build a name for himself, talking about pressing, talking about gegenpressing, counter-pressing, pressing and then pressing a press, and all of the different elements of it. Now, if you play without any kind of a press, you're strange in Germany. Everything is somehow related to a press or a counter-press. And it's just a given. It's just a given at this point. Doesn't mean you don't have teams that are good in possession. You know, you look at the top teams and you look at their possession numbers, they're high. You know, Bayern Munich is comfortable with the ball. Dortmund, comfortable with the ball. Leverkusen, comfortable with the ball. And the numbers are backing that up right now. But I think what you're seeing right now as people are coming back, pressing is something that you build up over time through instruction. It is a heavily coached tactic. Well, when you have 3 months off, you are not heavily coached. And you have a little bit less muscle memory, and you have a little bit, not quite as sharp in these elements. That's showing right now. There's some breakdowns that are happening in pressing that we're not used to seeing from some of these teams. But the idea that pressing is the identity of Germany, yeah, I think so. And that's why Pep Guardiola was able to fit there. Because Pep Guardiola knows a press. I mean, the Barcelona teams, we talk about the possession. I think the Spanish national teams, we talk about possession turning into a negative, turning into a defensive tactic. But when you look at Guardiola's teams, he always had an element of a press. They would lose possession and they would immediately try to win it back. They wanted the ball first, but they would immediately try to win the ball back when they lost it. That's a pressing element. So his teams at Bayern combined the two to a degree. He made some modifications to the way he plays to fit that team and fit also that league. And also, Germany, I think, learned from him, and you've seen teams try to accept more of that style as well. You've also had Louis van Gaal, who has had a massive influence on Bayern and on German football. The Dutch style has a lot of different subscribers in the German game. There's differences between a national identity with the German national team and the Bundesliga identity, just because of the differences in club tactics and national team tactics. So right now, in a league like the Bundesliga, it might look more different than a league like MLS or a league like England or Spain when they come back, because that reliance on pressing is something that needs time to build up. And when you have a disruption to the training like we've had with COVID-19, it gets a little disjointed. Teams that are not reliant on pressing might be able to hit the ground running a little bit faster, because if you press and don't do it effectively, you can create a whole lot of problems for your team. If you are not a pressing team and it's taking your guys some time to get back into the flow, maybe you're just a little bit safer. Maybe you're a little more conservative. Maybe you're not putting as many players forward. You can ease into things a little bit easier. If you're pressing, you got to be all in, 100%. All the buy-in has to be there, and you have to do it correctly, or you're going to put your team at risk. So that's the article from Wilson is a good one at The Guardian. I recommend I think it's his book as well, Zonal Marking, which is a fairly recent book that he did, the Inverting the Pyramid book, which gives you the long-term history of tactics. I mean, you're getting into teams, how they played a 2-3-5 back in the day and what that actually meant and what it looked like and how it changed over the years. Zonal Marking, the book, and sorry, that's Michael Cox. Sorry. Cox's book takes modern teams in the last 20 years or so and breaks down their tactics and how they've evolved. And that's a really fascinating read, and it's a little more immediate. So I would actually recommend, if you're looking to get deeper into tactics, start with the zonal marking book, because it'll be teams and players and coaches that you know right now, and then work backwards on more historical stuff. But this article at The Guardian gives you a little bit of a glimpse into what we're seeing in Germany right now and the effects of being reliant on pressing and the effects of having this break and not being able to train in the same way and having a big training break that just affects a team's coherence.
My question is more philosophical for this morning when it comes to tactics.
Okay.
Just what age, and I was thinking about this because of, folks in our timeline, some are fathers, some are youth coaches, things like that. What age would you transition from just kids going out there having fun and just out there on a weekend playing the game to actually introducing tactics into a team situation?
Well, first off, I wouldn't just have kids going out there having fun and not any thought behind it. That's incorrect from the jump. You want to create the fun elements in a thoughtful, intentional way. So even youngest kids, you want them to be learning certain foundational skills. You want to do it in a fun way. You're not thinking about tactics with 5-year-olds, but you're thinking about, how do I get them to use both feet? How do I get them to use the sole of their foot? How do I get them to use the outside of their foot? You're doing that. So don't put it out there that it is just go play. You need street soccer. You need the freedom to play, but there has to be a foundation and a training perspective of creating technical skill at the youngest ages. And then there is a step in between. It's not as simple as just, okay, you get to this age and now it's 11v11 and we're going to be very tactical. No, like really roughly, before we get Mike on, and we might revisit this at the end of the show.
Okay.
Really roughly, youngest ages, it's all individual. It's individual skill development. And we're going up to 7, 8. I mean, there's not a hard cutoff here. Understand this. But up to 7 or 8, it's individual skill development. It's both feet. It's all aspects of the foot. It's how to manipulate the ball, how to change directions. Dribble. Not worrying about shooting. Not worrying about passing. If it happens, it happens. Okay, I don't know what that beeping was outside. All right. Second, 8 to 12-ish, it is passing and combinations, because youngest kids are individual. They don't want to share. Middle age, 8 to 12, they're a little more interested in sharing. They're a little bit more interested in working with teammates, but it's hard to get a full team tactical possession style going because you're just building passing blocks. So you're talking about how to combine with a teammate near them. You're talking about how to pass. And again, that takes your individual skills to the next level. It's not just dribbling with both feet. It's passing with both feet. It's passing with the outside of the foot. All those elements. For me, tactics don't really matter until 11v11. And that's different place to place. I think it's once you're a teenager. I think it's once you're 13. You can start to introduce very small elements of group play in that 8 to 12 group, of how a group of players play, like a group of 4, positioning, minor. If you focus on that at the expense of the ball, you're going to produce limited players. So it is all about the ball for as long as possible. And once you get to 11v11 and teenagers, then you start to introduce formations, minimal tactics. And then as you get older and winning becomes more important and a part of the conversation of how to learn how to win, then you get into more tactics. That's my thought on it from what I've read, from what I've studied, from what I've seen. Very rough. Individual, passing, small group, tactical, full 11v11 play. If you're doing tactics in 7v7 or 6v6 with kids, you're trying to win games at the expense of the other things, because those kids need as much time on the ball as possible. And I would not be teaching a tactic for a 10-year-old to win a tournament at the expense of learning how to play with the ball at their feet. Because if you don't learn it at a young age, you're not going to learn it later in the same way.
Okay. Yeah, because that was kind of what I was getting into. I wasn't trying to just sit there and go, okay, how do you go from that, that scrum that we always picture in our minds, that it's just the kids kicking about and all that kind of stuff, but try to figure out, age groups and things like that when it came to tactics and stuff.
All right. Tell us about Steve Apolinsky while we get Mike Conti on the line.
Sure. Apolinsky & Associates, LLC, proud sponsor of everything SDH Networks and Soccer down here. You can catch up with Steve in a couple of different ways. You can go to their website, aa-legal.com. And when you go to the website, there's that chat window. Jason is discouraging the idea of going and checking in and asking what they're wearing at the chat window at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is available 24/7, 365. Don't ask if they're wearing khakis.
No.
Reach out to him that way. Shoot him an email, Steve, Steve, at aa-legal.com, or you can give him a buzz, 417-9191. Give him a phone call, get a free consultation. Over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in judgments for their clients. Georgia and Alabama wrongful death, serious injury attorneys, recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend Magazine for being one of the top 100 firms in this here state of Georgia. Apolinsky & Associates, 404-377-9191. aa-legal.com. Get your free chat window. Steve, Steve, at aa-legal.com.
Good work. Pretty good
Getting
one.
Getting there. Marshall Boyd has a question.
Well, why don't you say hello to Mike Conti first?
Is Mike Conti here?
I am. What does Marshall have to say?
He says, is there a better combination than morning mate and SDH? The answer's no.
Ooh,
I mean,
Jason has been trying to get me on Team Mate, and I'm not opposed to it. I'm not as stridently opposed to mate as Jason is opposed to Nutella.
That's true.
But mate is like that. That's a walk on the wild side when it comes to your hot beverage in the morning. That is a very, very different flavor profile with very, very different outcomes.
It is.
Yeah,
And Marshall
got to add some sugar or honey to it. I can't go straight up mate.
Yeah, it's very earthy, straight up.
Yeah.
I guess that would be the kindest way to put it, right?
Yeah, I think the other thing I need to do too is, the ways I've had mate have been the gringo kind of way. In a tea bag, which is not the traditional way to do it. It's not completely weird to do it that way, but it's not the traditional way. We see the guys with the mate, the gourd, the bombilla, the straw with a filter on it. So you're putting the loose leaves in the gourd, you're pouring hot water over them, and then you're drinking it out of a straw. That is the authentic way to do it. Probably a little bit better quality of mate than I'm typically getting as well. So I would like to try that at some point to have a full picture of this.
Isn't it dangerous to drink a hot beverage out of a straw, though?
I didn't know that. I've never heard that.
Like that was something I was taught at a very young age, that it was dangerous to drink a hot beverage out of a straw because you could burn your throat. I don't know if that was just my first grade teacher, Mrs. Hain, being silly. But of all the things I learned in first grade, that's one of the few things that's actually stuck with me.
Well, Tesco is with you on Twitch. He's saying that those metal straws get way too hot. So maybe. He also says mate with whiskey is actually really good.
Oh, that does sound good, actually. That sounds that's a hot toddy, basically.
Basically, yeah. Somehow we have lost John in the midst of this, which is prone to happen these days. Man, technology hates us in the last couple of days, Mike.
Do you want me to turn my camera on?
Sure, if you want to.
Sure. Let's try this. All right, can you see me?
I can see you. I have not brought you up to the population at Twitch yet. And I need to get you onto the Twitch stream. So, John, if you've chimed in, I'm going to have to come back to you, okay? And I'm
wait. If me being on camera is going to...
No, I'd already lost John. That's the problem, is he was already gone. So let's bring you here for now, and we'll figure this out here in a second.
Okay,
All right. so yeah, this is where you need a producer to do these things in the background, but, I'm just going to have to talk through it while we do it. All right, so you are live on the Twitch Soccer Down Here channel now. As we
I'm wearing my Hawks gear because I didn't think I'd be seen on Twitch today, so
it's all good.
No big deal.
It is all good. All right. And we will get John. So now you guys can hear Mike on Twitch, and we've got viewers there, and we've got people listening. We got a lot of stuff in MLS, a lot of stuff in American soccer as a whole. What did you think about the stuff that came out yesterday? I mean, pick wherever you want to start with MLS.
Yeah, I mean, look, I get where guys like Jeff Lorenowitz and Alec Can are obviously they're frustrated, they're hurt about what happened last week. To threaten a lockout is a pretty aggressive step, and I think Don Garber even admitted it was an aggressive step. I really do think, and I could be wrong, Jason, I really do think by the time that we get to matches resuming in a few weeks, a lot of this animosity will be gone.
I agree.
This is just what happens in negotiations. And look, the players had to accept some things that they didn't like. The owners or the league had to accept some things that they didn't like. You meet in the middle and you keep it moving. The big thing is Major League Soccer is not the same position as Major League Baseball, where I think now there's some extreme doubt as to whether or not they're going to be able to get over their problems and play a season. Who's going to benefit? Major League Soccer. They're going to have almost a full month's worth of matches that count, inventory on national television, when all the other major stick and ball sports in North America, aside from the NWSL, are still standing still. So a huge opportunity for MLS, one that the league will be better because of in the long run. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be comfortable. As Darren Eel said, it's not going to be perfect, this Orlando thing, but they're playing. And I think, as Darren said yesterday, huge round of applause for the players and the league to get this done, not get so bogged down in their feelings and their anger where it got to a point where there were not going to be games. It's a huge round of applause that they got this done. And on Monday, when we get the draw, I think we move to the next step of really starting to break down this tournament and getting excited about the fixtures that are going to be in place. And then I think the tone will change 100%. I think, the next couple days, we had it yesterday, we'll probably have it today. You're going to hear players venting, and that's okay. That's totally fine. But I really think by the time we get the draw on Monday, we'll be able to move past that really quickly, and we'll be able to concentrate on what I think is a huge opportunity for some really compelling action starting in July and continuing all the way into the fall.
Yeah, the other thing that jumped out to me is, if you lifted the training moratorium, now that even San Jose is able to train and market and figure out these next steps, the differences between MLS's plan to return to contact training and what we've seen in other leagues, the biggest one's the level of testing. You're talking about testing every other day, and when you compare that over a month's time, you're doing almost double the amount of tests that the Bundesliga is doing right now. That's substantial. It's costly, too.
Yeah, and I'm still not clear who's paying for the tested market. I know
sounds
that
like it's on the team, and that's what it is in other countries. That's what it's been. So it sounds like it's on the team and market, MLS in Orlando.
Yeah, these protocols are in place for a reason, and I think it is kind of fascinating reading, the specific information that the league provided us on the protocols. They have the green light to start full team training, but there's a 72-hour ramp-up process with testing that everyone's going to have to go through. So, like, Atlanta United is going to train today and tomorrow. That will be group training. That's not going to be full team training because you've got to test everyone for COVID 72 hours out and then test them again 24 hours out. So basically 2 tests in 3 days.
Two tests in that 72-hour period. 2 tests 24 hours apart. And your plan has to be approved by your local jurisdictions and the league. So there's things that got to come together.
Yeah, and I think in some states, Georgia being one of them, it seems like the framework for approval is already in place with local governments. But it's really, really interesting. I mean, they're going to do 2 tests in a 72-hour span. If someone tests positive, they're isolated, and then they're tested again within 24 hours, I would assume, to rule out a false positive.
Absolutely.
And then anyone who does test positive, they go into isolation. There is contact tracing, and they are not allowed back. I thought it was interesting. They didn't set a set timetable on when someone that tested positive would be allowed back. They would have to be cleared by a team medical officer and a league medical officer. Yeah. I don't know if that's the same in Germany and England, what they've been doing over
that was
in some
my
of those
question, because where I've seen other protocols, it's 2 negative tests as part of the return. And it doesn't say that that's not the case. That could be part of that approval process here. I would assume that it would be based off the other testing levels. So that's probably part of it. But I think it's a really well thought out plan, and they did not skimp on anything when you talk about the expense of it, because this is not going to be cheap to do all of this.
If you think about it, Jason, I mean, I think we had estimated on stoppage time Wednesday. I mean, at the very low end, $2 million, probably on the higher end, closer to $4 or $5 million to do all of this testing. But think about how much the league would stand to lose, not only in terms of money, but also in terms of credibility, if the testing is not in place to the degree that it needs to be, and you had a major outbreak in Orlando.
100%.
You've got to spend that money, because the damage you could do to the league, and I mean, that doesn't even mention the obvious health consequences for the players. I mean, it would be incalculable, the amount of damage that could be done if you were to have an outbreak. So anything that you can do to minimize the chances of that happening, you've got to spend the money and do it. And it seems like Major League Soccer and its clubs have accepted that reality, and that's a good thing. I think you heard Jeff Lorenowitz still express, a lot of concerns over questions that aren't answered yet. But to me, a lot of the things that he expressed concerns about yesterday, I think, are things that can be sorted out pretty quickly. Like, he wanted to know how many people are allowed on an elevator at the hotel at Disney World. Great question. Mm-hmm. There's an answer to that. I mean, it's not like you need 3 days of debate to determine, okay, you can only have 6 people on an elevator. It sounds like one of the more substantial questions that isn't answered is the Disney staff going to be tested? Great question. And I don't even know if the NBA has figured that out yet. Yeah. I know there's a lot of infighting in the NBA right now over the hotels that would be used. And just for background, in the collective bargaining agreement in the NBA, there is a certain standard of hotel that they are required to stay at. That's not the case in MLS. So the hotel that MLS is using, which is a beautiful hotel, I've heard some NBA teams are objecting to the use of that hotel because it doesn't rise to the level of what they're used to having on the road. I also think most of the MLS teams would be out of there before the NBA gets in there. The NBA players and coaches are going to be allowed to play golf. They're going to be allowed to eat at any restaurant on the Disney property. If they leave their hotel, they have to practice social distancing. I don't really know how you'll enforce that. But the NBA is going to be allowed to leave the bubble. It sounds like MLS is not going to be allowed to leave the bubble, at least as I understand. But again, this goes back to what Jeff talked about yesterday. He's worried about all these things that haven't been answered. Yeah. I get the feeling that it's not going to be that hard to answer these remaining questions, that the big stuff they're on the same page on.
Yeah, I think if the NBA goes forward with allowing players to leave the bubble, I think MLS is going to have to follow.
I agree.
It's going to be very hard for them not to, but that's also going to put responsibility on the players, and that has to be understood as well, and that if you go out and you don't follow protocols and you don't follow social distancing and you then get sick, you're putting your teammates at risk. And that's the element of this. That's why Phil Foden has been yelled at in Manchester City, because he went out and is doing things that he's not supposed to be doing right now and running a risk of contracting COVID-19. That's why players who are not following the protocols, Liverpool, Jurgen Klopp talked about it. He's asked all of his players to wear masks. He's even asked all of his players to wear gloves when they're out in public because he knows they have to a certain degree. They have to put gas in the car. They have to go to the store. But they also have a responsibility to the club to not do anything to risk getting sick. And that's just part of the conversation right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So it's exciting. I mean, I know there's a lot of hard feelings right now, but they'll fade. I'm really excited. I think you're excited too. I think it's a great opportunity for the league. Do you know, honestly, what made me the most excited yesterday? I think Wednesday was our day of excitement about MLS. I was shocked to see the news about USL Championship. I think that's awesome news. I am very pleasantly surprised that not only are they planning on starting play, they have a date. And it sounds like it's going to be play in home markets. And that's just, it's exciting for those young players on Atlanta United too. I also think now this creates a new conversation about roster expansion for MLS, because a lot of what we had assumed and talked about there, Jason, assumed on either a very abbreviated USL Championship season or none at all. Now that we know that they are going to have a season, I think that makes a roster expansion question a lot more complicated for MLS, and there's going to be a ripple down effect there. But I was really, really pumped up to see that news. I think that's great. I think a lot of the markets in USL, Louisville, Las Vegas, Phoenix, New Mexico, USL Championship has been vital in growing the game in a lot of the medium-sized markets in this country. So the fact that they're going to be able to get back, I was really, really concerned, not so much with the loss of some of the second teams, but, thinking about Louisville, thinking about, even Austin Bold, thinking about New Mexico and Phoenix and those markets I've mentioned that have been thriving in USL. Birmingham, who I think was on the verge of something really big with their friendly against Atlanta United being the launch point. I'm just so glad that they figured out a way with USL Championship and hopefully, for League One, there might be a path forward where they can get back on their feet hopefully pretty soon. But that was huge news to me. For you talk about the state of the game in the U.S., where you have the NWSL, MLS, and USL Championship, all with start dates pretty soon. Mm-hmm. And Major League Baseball and Minor League Baseball are in extreme danger. And a lot of other sports are in real trouble right now. Yes, John, I see you. Action at the fraction. It's going to be action. I don't know if fans will be allowed in, but there will be action at the fraction this summer. And I'm pumped for you and John. I think that's great. I don't know how the broadcast, I know the news release had suggested that there were some broadcast things to work out, but I think that's great. It's more TV content. Yeah. And those matches in July, depending on how they can schedule the fixtures, again, I'm going to be starving for sports content in July. So, if I have to stay up late to watch Las Vegas Lights against, Phoenix or New Mexico or something like that, sign me up. I'm all for it.
Look, Five Stripes After Dark is fun, but USL After Dark gets really weird sometimes. So I am all in on this. According to Chris Ashley in Greenville, USL League One owners are talking today about what their plan looks like for the third division. So a lot of progress here. I mean, a lot of good things. There are questions as Paul Tenorio wrapped up in a really good piece at The Athletic, kind of tying everything together and how everything went down. Talked to a lot of players and got a lot of feedback, I think, on the player side of it. Yeah, there's bruising right now. I'm with you. I think any complicated negotiation, that's going to be the case. It's almost impossible to avoid. And MLS, and Don Garber said it, this was the first time there had been a lockout threat. It's the first time in league history that it had to happen, and he felt like it had to happen. They did get a deal done a couple days later, and the league gave a lot. So now we see what happens on the other side of this. The league has a lot of things that it has to do, I think, to take advantage of this. The production is going to be really interesting of these broadcasts from a TV perspective. According to Morning Consult, ESPN is handling all the production, but Fox and Today NA will have games. They'll ship them a clean feed. What kind of things do you think can be done with these games in Orlando that won't be in traditional stadiums, that won't have a traditional look and feel, but how can you make it pop on TV?
Wow.
They've talked about additional cameras, which is going to be interesting in some of these venues. Okay, how do you use them?
Right. Like, unless you're talking about a Skycam situation, which has been done.
Yeah. I don't think you could do it on these fields.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like, you can't necessarily rig up Skycam unless you have light standards in all four quarters that would be tall enough to support it. Skycam's really good for replays. It's not good for live action.
100%. I think make you motion sickness if you do it in live action.
And honestly, like, one of the things I worry about, Jason, is you can get too innovative.
Yes.
And you can make it hard to watch. What Fox has tried to do with their NASCAR production, and I really tip my cap to them. I mean, they're doing a tremendous job under difficult circumstances. But, they have this drone camera that honestly makes me motion sick because it's going so fast and it's zipping around and the guy running the camera is, mashing the joystick or whatever, and it can do more harm than good. So
some of those angles that we saw on like kickoffs in the NFL last year, some of those would make me sick too.
Honestly, I think you got to be a little bit careful because if you try to jazz up the TV production too much, you're going to alienate people who are trying to consume soccer.
Yeah. There's
got to be a middle ground. I think it comes in the sound. I think it's miking up the referee. I think it might be miking up some players. If you want to have a delayed feed on ESPN and a non-delayed feed on ESPN Plus, so if Brad Guzan curses, we can hear it. You could probably do it that way. That's where I think you're going to see the innovation. It's not necessarily going to be with camera angles or additional cameras. I think you're going to hear the announcers laying out a lot more. You'll hear more of the chatter on the field. Because honestly, before the Bundesliga started pumping in crowd noise, I wish I spoke German because it would be really, really fascinating to understand the communication that's happening out there. I think we'll get a better sense for that in MLS. Again, I do worry about the optics of playing on fields, even without empty bleachers, just a field. But I think there are ways around it. We've seen in the Bundesliga. I know there are a couple teams that they've used oversized ad hoardings and they've used tarps to cover up seats, and you can make it look like a non high school level atmosphere, if you will.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to look at some of the screens like we've seen with some. I think Denmark's done it. I believe Portugal might have done it. Costa Rica's done a little bit with it, with like the Zoom screen kind of idea with fans, being seen by the players on the field. They've talked about, Don Garber's talked about trying to be innovative and trying to really do some different things with this. The only other one that I've heard worldwide that I don't know if it would work in Orlando because of the setup, but who knows, maybe it could. I mean, in Spain, they've been talking about potentially like virtual fans beyond the screen idea, but kind of superimposing things on the stands and things like that. I don't know. I'm with you. I think sound is the key.
Yeah, and I think, again, everyone kind of acknowledges that this is short term.
Yeah,
this is only a 35-day tournament. I mean, this is MLS matches are not going to be played on outside fields at the Disney World Wide World of Sports complex forever. No. So I think viewers are going to be willing to. In fact, I think we've seen with the TV ratings for Bundesliga, NASCAR, UFC. UFC has actually done a really good job. Really, really good job, where you don't even notice that you're in empty buildings. I think we've noticed the TV ratings are not affected just because fans aren't in the building. I don't think that's going to be the case with MLS too. So I guess my word of wisdom would be, don't try too hard to create an atmosphere that's fake.
Yeah.
What's going to help the most is having good games, having good, compelling action. And I think, again, there are things you can do with sound, maybe some robotic cameras, maybe, I don't know, you put a camera inside the net or something like that. I don't know.
Tesco's voting for a ref cam.
Yeah, honestly, they did that in the NFL. They put a camera, a GoPro on the umpire's hat. Maybe you could do that.
Yeah.
I think what's more important, Jason, is just give us good games in the prime slots, which I'm sure they will do. And I want to reiterate, the TV announcers lay out, let us hear the action. It's not really possible for us on radio because we're trying to describe the movements of the game.
It's one of those things, because I went through this with Germany too, and we've talked about this a ton. I think we've talked about it on SDH and on Stoppage Time a ton too. Like, you get these different feels of, a Latin game, for example, they don't lay out very much at all, but they do at certain moments. A game here, I think they lay out a lot on TV. I think in England they lay out a lot. It's almost like you have to feel it out because you don't know exactly what you're going to hear yet. I think when you are getting audio from the field that is interesting, lay out, but you might have to fill more space because there might not be anything there. It's almost also, like you got to be able to improvise a little bit on these.
Yeah. Yeah, also very true. Also very true. We'll see. I'm just excited again that, we're having these discussions and not, what happens if you don't have a season at all? So they'll figure it out. And the reason why ESPN is producing it is because they own the property and they have the broadcast structure.
And it doesn't make sense for Fox to send producers in for their games and 2Day NA to send producers in for their games because you are trying to keep it down to as few people as possible. And go ahead. It's
money as well, which is huge.
Yeah.
I mean,
for sure.
One of the reasons why Fox has not done any wraparound content with Bundesliga is it's expensive to crew a pregame show right now.
Yeah.
And they're losing that contract in a couple weeks anyway. So in the cost-benefit analysis, they've determined the benefits don't outweigh the cost. I respect that.
I want to see what ESPN does with the German Cup because they have the German Cup now, and they're getting Bundesliga next year on ESPN+. Will they maybe do a few things with it? I think they will because it makes sense for them to introduce it to their audience. Katie Weaver had a question about our role with everything going on. Local radio broadcast of games, check. Latest on media rules, presence on site. Haven't seen anything, but it's not happening at the moment. They're not being tested. I mean, it's that simple. Is in a team environment, players are being tested, staff's being tested, team being tested every other day. They can't mandate that the media is being tested at that same level. So if the media is coming in without being tested, is that safe? Does that meet COVID-19 safety standards? It doesn't.
No. They're going to have to figure that out at some point. I mean,
at some point they will.
But
or they have to be socially distanced. And that's the other thing I think we understand is in Korea, for example, I saw the way they did media and post-game for people who were obviously not being tested on a regular basis. Like in Germany, you have broadcasters, you have a world feed, you have people there who are following testing protocols to be on site. Right. In Korea, they were on site, but it was almost like a second tier where they had masks, I think they had gloves, and they were in the stands asking questions of a player on the field. So there was a press conference, but they were socially distanced to do it. That's what you're going to have to do.
Yeah, let me tell you what I think is going to happen based on what I have heard. As far as what's going on locally, first of all, Atlanta United's done an amazing job. They're providing us with rights-free video, imagery, interviews on which we can submit questions. They've done an amazing job. So, the access that we're getting right now locally is as good as it can be under the current circumstances. They are going to have to figure out a way to let us on site at some point. I know they're working on it, and what they've done in the interim has been awesome. What I think Orlando will look like, Jason and Katie, is very similar to what we are seeing with NASCAR right now, where you will have probably a group of, I'd say a small handful, maybe 4 or 5 pool reporters who will be appointed, will be tested, will stay in the bubble, and they will be the pool correspondents on site that will gather, quotes, conduct interviews, and then disseminate those quotes to the rest of us. I would also imagine, much like NASCAR, that selected players and coaches will be made available on Zoom calls immediately after games. That's what NASCAR is doing. They're taking requested drivers after each race and making them available on Zoom calls pretty soon after the race. There is a pool reporter on site at NASCAR races, but only one. That's what I think you're going to get to. Again, you're just trying to – I think you have a couple things in play. You're trying to minimize the amount of people on site for safety reasons. Yeah. But also, I mean, I don't – as much as I love doing games, I can't go to Orlando for 6 weeks and be away from my family for 6 weeks. I can't do that. And I think a lot of people who are in the press corps covering this league are in the same boat. It's just not practical to be away from our family for that long. So if you can appoint a couple,
come in and out. That's the thing. Is the way right. I mean, unless you're being tested by the league and by the people, that's not easy to do either.
No, but that's why I'm saying if you have a handful of pool reporters that you are testing, and it might be Orlando-based people who can sleep home and be tested when they enter the bubble every day. It might be. I don't know. That's speculative. But, announcers will not be on site, TV or radio, in Orlando. Everything will be called from studio, and that's fine. That's what's safe. My hope is that once we get back into home markets, we can be on site. I think every game would certainly be allowed on site by that point, but I think that's still uncertain. But all announcers will be off-site TV and radio for Orlando. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to be doing games. And we've done games from off-site before, and we'll do it again this way, and it'll be totally fine.
Yep. We will, and when we were talking to the team about different elements of interviews and pregame and postgame and trying to be creative as we can to make it work in this environment. It's different than a broadcast, right? Find a new way.
Yeah, it's actually going to be really cool. I mean, we're talking about doing a lot of things we've never done before to provide you some really inside content that I think is going to be fascinating and something that I hope we can continue to do even post-pandemic. Yeah. So, I mean, stay tuned on that. We're in very early days of working that all out. But I think it's going to be great. It's going to be great, and we'll get through it as best we can. But I think these are things that the league will probably want to do as well. You know, if you can't have fans on premises and media is reduced, you've got to find, honestly, I think even more critically than the game broadcast itself, you've got to find ways to keep that turning when matches are not being played. That's something Atlanta United has done so well with Matt Moore's team and Katie Gillen's team on the social side with Mikey Alfano and Kat Gutierrez and Ryan Katniss and that whole crew. I mean, they were so good at churning out that content on a daily basis. And it was high quality. And that's what the league has got to do. It can't look like some slap-together reality show that's being filmed on camera phones. It's got to look good. We've got to learn things that we don't know. We've got to get access that we wouldn't typically get. That will help. And I'm knowing the people that are going to be in the bubble, I'm very confident that we're going to get that because they're sending some really good people down there.
They've got to get some interesting engagement going on with ESPN, and that's where I think MLS could really benefit because it's on ESPN Disney property. You're going to be having a lot of these games on the ESPN family of networks like we've seen with Korean baseball. If you're getting the KBO leading into Get Up or SportsCenter in the morning, are we going to have MLS leading into First Take and these kinds of shows and them actually talking about it at that point? That's great. A game changer for this league.
Never happened for MLS. I mean, it may happen during World Cups, but it's never really happened for MLS. Again, if that does not happen, then ESPN has failed. Because what the hell?
And the league has too. Both have, because it's a huge opportunity.
Absolutely. I think the league will be very ready to help and accommodate. If ESPN doesn't take them up on it, ESPN has not only failed to promote its own product, that they're paying a lot of money to show and are probably taking on an expense to put together down on their property. But they've also been derelict in their journalistic duties. No other games are going to be, unless baseball somehow has a breakthrough, this is going to be it in the month of July. So they'd be derelict in their journalistic duties if they didn't give that the high level of treatment.
Those morning games could actually create a unique opportunity too.
Right, yeah. Yeah, okay, so maybe Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon don't know a lot about soccer. We'll have Taylor Twellman on to educate them.
Here's my idea, and I'm hoping that an ESPN producer is listening to the show this morning. I think the obvious choice to jump on after a game, if you have a game end they played 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and you have a game end, you're going to go probably into First Take on one of the channels. I think the easy choice is Taylor Twellman to hop on First Take. That would work. You're going to get a lot of yelling. You're going to get a lot of red faces. You're going to get a lot of good times. I have a better idea, I think. Alejandro Moreno on First Take.
Mm-hmm.
Ollie and Stephen A. Smith back and forth. I'm watching. I'm all in. Yeah.
No, I agree. I totally agree. And I think there's an opportunity, too, for ESPN and please don't misunderstand. This is not a comment on Hercules Gomez or Jeff Carlisle or the staff that they have there that does such an amazing job covering this league. But boy, I mean, like Grant Wall's out there right now looking for someone to hire him. Yeah. Here's a chance for you to really beef up the journalistic side of what you're doing and cross that over to some on-air opportunities. So, yeah, I mean, this is why, again, this is such a big win for the league that they were able to get this done, because they have a blank canvas with which to work with ESPN to develop wall-to-wall coverage for a month. At a point of time where a lot of people are still at home watching sports. I'm really excited, and I hope they do it the right way, and I think they will.
I think so, too. I'm excited. We will see what we learn over the weekend, and we'll have a lot of things to talk about next week, moving from not just business and testing and protocols, but maybe we're actually going to start talking about lineups, start talking about how teams are going to look like, start talking about what a draw is going to look like for this competition. I can't wait.
Yeah, I think we're going to get the draw on Monday based on what Darren said yesterday. Okay. So we'll have a lot to analyze there. I think, we'll probably learn about some opt-outs. I don't anticipate Atlanta United will have an opt-out, but you might get some opt-outs around the league. So, we'll learn more about that. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff brewing around the league. Alexander Katai in L.A., that's a mess right now. So, I mean, we're going to have storylines really develop over the weekend and into the first part of next week. And I can't wait to break it all down. I think when we get the draw, we'll probably do a bonus stoppage time on Monday. But really looking forward to breaking it all down and keeping a really close eye on USL and USL League One. I'm really so optimistic about soccer in this country this summer. And some of the news has been unexpectedly good over the last 48 hours. So hopefully that continues.
Yeah, hope we continue to get more. What are you cooking out today?
I'm doing bar food today as a salute to our service industry that's starting to reopen. So doing some smoked wings on the Big Green Egg.
And then we're going to fry.
I think so. It's hard to mess up. I've messed up the last few things I've done, so I don't think I can mess that up. And we'll fry some mushrooms. I love fried mushrooms.
Oh, great!
We'll do fried mushrooms and fried zucchini. So,
yes.
And I think we'll do some Aperol spritzes to drink because it's starting to get really, really hot.
Good calls, man. I might be crashing your place later.
Come on over. You know where to find me.
Thanks, Mike. Talk to you next week.
See you guys.
All right, everybody watching on Twitch, you got to bear with me for just a minute while we try to get John back on the call since we lost him before and make him where you can see him. So you're hearing the Skype dialing in as John tries to reconnect. And I don't know where he is. It froze up for a second. Yep, I'm back. That's what happens with the Skype interaction, Chris. And hold on as we try to get John back on Twitch. I see him. You can hear him on the live audio, not on Twitch. You'll be able to see him on Twitch right about now as we resize him. This is what a producer does.
Yes.
It's not what a host generally does.
No.
But welcome to Soccer Down here.
Yes. Chris Hutchison actually has a good idea.
What is Chris Hutchison's good idea?
I was just going to suggest a Cooking with Conti segment for the show.
Yes, we will do this. We are still waiting on Cooking with Nick Alifi. That has been promised for a while.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, it hasn't been delivered upon. Just saying.
Yes.
Just saying, it hasn't happened.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of fried zucchini.
You're not a fan of anything, John. We've covered this many, many times. You don't like anything that's abnormal when it comes to food. Do you like zucchini?
No.
Why would you ever act that way about zucchini?
I'm not a squash person. I'm not a zucchini person.
But don't go,
no.
Just don't like it. No, just don't like it. It's fine.
No, I don't like it.
You're missing out, and you're completely and utterly wrong. But
you can have mine. That's fine.
No,
Mike, if Mike cooks it, you can have mine. Bottom line.
No, I'll get my own zucchini because I like zucchini. I like to saute some zucchini and butter and salt and black pepper. It's simple, easy. Nope. It's good. It's good stuff. Nope. I'll fry it up too. Fried mushrooms. Do you have an issue with that?
Mushrooms, I have mushrooms on my steak and mushrooms on a bunch of different things. I've never fried a mushroom before.
What?
Uh-uh.
You've never been to a place that had fried mushrooms?
I've had mushrooms on steak. It's not fried, I don't think.
No, it's not fried.
Yeah. I mean, it's sautéed or broiled or whatever, but never.
No, it's
never
not boiled.
Fried.
Oh, God, that's gross.
No, broiled. Broiled.
You're not
broiled
broiling.
mushrooms.
John, you gotta watch Cooking Network and Food Network and maybe try to cook and not burn your house down at some point. Wow.
No, I'm the guy that would be making the idiot sandwiches. That would be me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a show, Worst Cooks in America, that you would qualify for. 100%.
Agreed. Right there.
Good grief.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, what else do we have on the social medias that people have been asking or talking about?
We're caught up on Twitters.
Okay.
We have not discussed anything going on in England or anything like that this morning.
All right, so let's run through everything but England first, and then we'll get there. We didn't talk about this yesterday with all the chaos. You wanted to put Jadon Sancho in the Twit of the Day contest. I'm going to disagree with you.
Sure.
Kate McGreevy at the Daily Mail wrote about it, and Sancho, Rafael Guerrero, Thorgan Hazard, 3 other players, hot water with Borussia Dortmund. They reportedly broke coronavirus protocols to have their hair cut by a celebrity stylist.
Mm-hmm.
This is what Dortmund said. This is what the club said. It is pretty common that our guys must get their hair cut after all these months. But it surely is a no-go from both sides to not wear a mask. We will remind our players about that very, very clearly. Also, the stylist should ask himself about his behavior, too. Now, one of the players responded by saying that his mask was not worn for the photographs published by Bild, and that he stuck to all hygiene rules very strictly. I'm not going to call them liars. So I'm not going to put them in the Twit of the Day contest. If they were following the hygiene protocols and got their haircuts and then took masks off for pictures, well, that's what they did. And I'm not going to put them in the Twit of the Day contest. What are you pointing at?
Did you go from Germany to England to get a haircut?
No. Nobody said they did.
I thought they went from one country to another to get a haircut. They hopped on a plane to go get a haircut.
6 people went to go get a haircut? Well, okay, then what's the problem with that one if they're able to spend on that kind of a haircut? I don't have that ability to have that kind of a haircut. I
don't
shave it off
either.
myself, or I'll go to the place on the street. But, okay, what does that have to do with it?
All right. What about if they go and they're going to England and they're hopping on a plane? How safe was the plane? Was the plane sanitized? Was it a private jet? Those kinds of things. I'm trying
following the protocols. That's
by wearing masks and all of that stuff. Just wear the mask for the photo.
Oh no, I would have done that too. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's silly, but it's not Twit of the Day material. We've had some pretty high bars set for Twit of the Day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I put Sunderland as a part of that discussion yesterday as well.
But in this case, unless you're going to say the players are lying, which I have no way to say that. If they're saying we did what we were supposed to do, we took the mask off for the picture, blah, blah, blah. The team says, look, we're not happy about it. We're going to remind them clearly to wear the mask, make sure, blah, blah, blah.
Wear the mask.
You're getting smacked on the wrist. You did something a little silly with a picture. Did you do more? I can't prove it, so I'm not going to accuse you of that.
Yeah, just wear the mask for the photo.
No, of course, but it's not that big of a deal. Just don't do what you do, where you say that it's not going to happen. If it hasn't happened, it ain't happening, and all this kind of nonsense. Give people the benefit of the doubt, man. I know you don't give Zucchini the benefit of the doubt, but give these guys the benefit of the doubt. They said they did the thing. They said they took the mask off for the picture. You don't have any way to say that's untrue. So just
stay in country. Wear the mask.
Well, no, the stay in country part doesn't apply to it either, unless they weren't doing things from a protocol perspective, and that's what I don't know. I don't know so, if they have the means to go to their celebrity stylist. Good for them. I wish I did. I don't have a stylist. I don't have a celebrity stylist. I don't get on a plane to go for a haircut. I'm not making millions and millions of dollars either.
No.
Good for the stylist for making some money. Why are you trying to take money out of his pocket, John?
Find a way for the style. If you import the stylist. Don't export
he's
7
still flying,
players.
And then is the plane safe? And then is blah, 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 all the things that you said. It's the same thing if he's importing here. They're going there. I mean,
players, just keep the players at home. Bring the stylist in. Wear the mask for the photo.
Stop being grouchy old man here. Come on. All right.
I got a birthday coming. I can be grouchy.
No, don't be grouchy. There's no reason to be grouchy. Spain, Lionel Messi, not training. We're getting conflicting reports of an adductor injury, potentially a calf injury, et cetera, et cetera. No real detail as of yet, but he has not trained for a few days with Barcelona. No reports of anything other than an injury. It's just we're not sure what the injury is. And it doesn't sound like it is a major catastrophic injury, but it's keeping him from training right now. England, a couple updates. Oh, no, let's come back to England. There's a couple things outside of the big stuff in England, but we'll save all of that for the England segment. France, a couple different things. The court hearing that Amiens, Toulouse, who are getting relegated, and Lyon, because they're not going to Europe, have filed. That will likely be decided by a judge early next week. There were 3 hours of debate yesterday. The league didn't exactly look good, according to RMC Sport. And there is potentially some doubt on the decision-making process that the league used to stop play. So keep an eye on what's going on in France. There's a feeling that maybe this court case has some legs to it. Also in France, the league is allowing a summer transfer window to open Monday just in France, a domestic transfer window, which is different than any kind of international transfer window. That 12-week time frame, this doesn't apply to it from my understanding because it's just domestic. They're allowing this because it will help some clubs balance their books. It will help some clubs make some deals to balance their books by the end of the month. So as of Monday, they can formalize transfers between French clubs, account for them in the final accounting, which I think is due June 30th. It'll allow those who manage to close deals to lessen losses and present a less catastrophic financial picture. For the classic transfer window, they're going to wait a little bit longer, and it will likely be timed with the end of the European Cups in August. The international transfer window will be extended by September 1st. This is what France and French media are thinking. That goes along with some other things we've seen. Now you're starting to get more conversation on what a transfer window looks like worldwide. MLS will be part of that to some degree, and they've got to make decisions too, and that question's come up. But there's still a lot of big things to sort out before we get to big details there. More on transfer windows from Russia. Their transfer window will be open July 26 to September 16. They had a general meeting of clubs. Grigory Ivanov of Ural, their president, told Sport Express some of the things that happened. I don't know if the league is going to be happy about Mr. Ivanov talking so much.
Yeah.
Nothing major. I mean, no major surprises. Everything will be decided on Tuesday about their next steps. They have decided that the league will be finished. The championship will be played out. Situation with fans has not changed. Not more than 10%. Some cities, there won't be fans. It's going to be down to medical regulations, local regions, et cetera, et cetera. No understanding of when the season will resume. It's still being worked out. But that transfer window is set for July 26th through September 16 in Russia. I'd be curious to see if other leagues follow that kind of time frame. Portugal, yesterday there were games. You could watch them on Gold TV. The first game was not very entertaining. Benfica and Tondela, scoreless draw. Benfica fans were not happy about this. Their own fans threw rocks at their team bus. Yes. Mm-hmm. 2 players needed hospital assistance. Andrea Zivkovic and Julian Weigl, German, who was part of the Borussia Dortmund bus issue with bombs going off. So Weigels had some awful luck, and Dortmund actually sent well wishes to him. Tribuna Expresso also reporting that Benfica players' homes were sprayed with graffiti threats, and they suspect it is from Benfica's ultras, who are called the No-Name Boys, who should be called the freaking morons.
Yes.
Who are now attacking their own fans and graffitiing houses and attacking buses, and this is an absolute freaking embarrassment. And it's an embarrassment for the game. It's an embarrassment for Portuguese football. It's an embarrassment for the club. And you got to get a handle on this. This is bad. There's been issues with this group before. I don't know if they've been to this degree. So we'll see what more comes out of it. I don't think the injuries are expected to be severe with those 2 players who needed hospital assistance, but I believe Zivkovic has actually come out and said that it's going to be okay. And we're not getting Thunder now, and Gwen is not happy about it. She's not happy about Benfica hooligans either.
No.
One other one real quick before we get to England that does kind of cross over. Gwen, relax. It's just Thunder. She's not going to listen to me.
No.
In World Cup qualifying in Asia, a tentative schedule has been chalked out with the Asian Football Confederation. I should probably turn a light on since it's getting so dark.
Yeah.
The World Cup qualifying campaign in Asia expected to resume October 8th. And the reason why is you've got games that were supposed to take place in March and June. They haven't. Now it looks like they're going to be pushed to October and November in Asia. We'll see what other confederations might do with this. So don't know if it's going to mean anything for a CONCACAF, for example. Now we're starting to see reporting about a week after the fact about the comments that have been made about CONCACAF doing 3 groups of 4 and how difficult that's going to be for the United States. Because it is.
Yeah.
It's going to give you less margin for error. What do you have in England as we wrap up for the week?
A couple of different things. Let's start with relegation.
Okay.
Susie Rack on Twitter from The Guardian does quality work. And this is her tweet. Liverpool women, underfunded, undersupported, and now relegated. I hope it tarnishes that Premier League trophy slightly. The players, manager, and fans of the women's team deserve better. So, Suzanne Rack discussing.
It's not going to tarnish the Premier League trophy, and I don't think that's a fair statement to make. Is it going to tarnish the club? Yeah, it should.
Yeah.
Now, those are 2 different things, and it's not fair to tie them together. It tarnishes the club because this is not a new thing. There were a lot of questions earlier this year about the differences in treatment between the men's team and the women's team on their American tour last summer. There are differences in just the way players are treated. It's not a good situation, period. And it doesn't mean that the men's title's tarnished. That's not fair to the men. That's not fair to Jurgen Klopp. That's not fair to the players. It's the club that is at fault here, not Jurgen Klopp, not Mo Salah, not Jordan Henderson. It's the club. It's the people making the decisions at the higher level. That needs to be specified, because I don't think you're going to win any goodwill here by saying that the Premier League title should be tarnished by this. They have nothing to do with it.
No.
That's incorrect, and I think that's not going to accomplish what it needs to accomplish. The questions need to be asked of the ownership. The questions need to be asked of the chief executives, because there's no excuse. The money's obviously there. There's no reason why the men should be flying city to city in the United States and the women should be on an 8-hour bus ride.
Right.
There's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for multiple players who have said they're leaving the club on the women's side for next season, talking about not enjoying football anymore. There's no excuse for that. Should they be relegated? No, because I don't think they should be relegating leagues that don't finish seasons. I don't think that should happen. They were 1 point from safety. Now the team ahead of them had a game in hand, so you could say potentially they would have been 4 points from safety. But you had games to make that up. They shouldn't be relegated.
Yeah, there were 8 games left in the season.
But these are two different conversations. I want to be clear. Liverpool's women should not be relegated from the Women's Super League, period, because they shouldn't be relegating in leagues that aren't finishing.
Agreed.
The premiership title that they are going to win at Liverpool should not be tarnished by the mistreatment of the women's team. The club should be tarnished by the mistreatment of the women's team. That's not fair to Jurgen Klopp or those players who have worked very hard to have one of the best seasons in history. The club should be questioned. The club should be held accountable. That's not acceptable for a club that is not lacking for resources. Their women's team should be treated better, and they need to be going forward. But it's not as simple as saying that the men's team is at fault here. They don't make those decisions. Jurgen Klopp's not doing anything with the budget on the women's team. That's the people above him who need to be questioned. And they should be. And they absolutely should be. But don't throw Jurgen Klopp under the bus. I'm defending Jurgen Klopp in this, and Jurgen Klopp at times frustrates me with the way he tries to play victim at times where there's no victim to play. But he's not to blame for this. That's craziness. And you don't strengthen the argument by trying to bring the men's team into it in this way and throwing fault at them and saying their title's tarnished. That's not the right way to handle it.
Right. I'm going to save the Premier League stuff that I have on the list for the end. I've got lower division stuff here real quick. One story. English football, we know that they're coming back. It looks like the EFL is set to hold the crucial extraordinary general meeting on Tuesday, where clubs in Championship and League One are going to consider different ways to complete the season. League One clubs are split on whether to try and play out the rest of the campaign. League Two looks likely to decide their final table on points per game, but relegation is an issue, and we have discussed that as well.
Yeah, League One, it's looking like Tuesday will be the day that they'll vote. It looks like they will do pro rel, but they'll curtail the season. That would mean, and they're going to do the points per game system, which gets a little wonky because Wickham goes from 8th to 3rd. Peterborough is pushed out. And, yeah, you've got some serious problems to handle with this. So we'll see. We'll see how they do it, but that could happen. And that means Oxford United, Portsmouth, Wickham, and Fleetwood Town are going to be, reportedly, they've done testing starting yesterday, and they'll return to training on Monday to get ready for a playoff.
Did you see the story in the 3-letter worded paper whose name we don't mention about pro rel could have no rel in the Premier League?
Yeah, we talked about this a bunch.
And so FA chief Greg Clark is ready to make the U-turn over his promotion relegation demands if Top Flight and Championship cannot finish.
Yeah, I mean, that's come up multiple times. We'll see if they actually do it. I don't know if they will. But the Premier League's going to have some decisions on Pro Rel. The Premier League's going to have some decisions on what happens with the Championship if they finish. The Championship is trying to finish, and they're working towards it. But, man, they're running in a really condensed schedule to get it done. Below that, I don't think the others finish, but they're talking about having promotion playoffs, which is crazy to have these teams spend the money they're going to have to spend to be safe and train and get ready to play, and they're not going to have their full squads. They're not going to have the guys who were on loan with them because they can't afford to have them anymore. It is what it is. I mean, I don't know if they're really doing this in the best way forward, but there's not a lot of easy solutions here.
On the kits, it looks like Premier League teams are going to have the National Health Service heart on them as a way to show support for first responders. And also, apparently, the Premier League is not going to allow those large ads that you see on the opposite side of the touchline and the TV cameras like we've seen in the Bundesliga. That got a finger wag from the front office of the Premier League, so you won't see that on television.
Well, I disagree with that. If you can bring in some revenue from it and it makes it look better when there's fans not in the stands, I don't have a problem with it. I think that's a little silly. That's a lot of thunder.
Yeah. Premier League
probably
chief.
A good sign, so wrap up quickly.
Okay. Just
we're
a couple of greatest
off.
Yeah, a couple of greatest hits here real quick. Premier League Chief Exec Richard Masters has told the fiancé of the late Jamal Khashoggi he's extremely sympathetic after she called for the Saudi Arabia-backed Newcastle takeover to be stopped. Hatis Cengiz' lawyer wrote to Masters on 2 occasions urging him to block the £300 million deal. The Premier League have now revealed those calls are being, quote, fully considered, end quote.
Yeah, and we'll see. But again, the piracy is going to be the issue they're going to point to.
Yeah. From The Guardian, Andy Hunter, Premier League has confirmed Liverpool could win the title at Anfield despite police calls for any game that can seal the club for their first championship in 30 years.
We've had the back and forth on this. We've talked about it the last few days. It's still up in the air.
And I did a little research. I don't know if this is the show that you were thinking about, but Deutsche Welle has a show called Bundesliga Kickoff where they discuss tactics.
It could be. It's a show that's been running for a long time. That could be it.
And the Premier League schedule, how to watch has come out. Go to your favorite website. Pro Soccer Talk has the full list for the first couple of match days. And a quick promotion, Soccer Down Here is sponsoring the NPSL Maikuju Classic this weekend. The broadcast of Georgia Revs Greenville FC from last May is on your favorite platform and NPSL, so good to be a part of that. Catch the 1v1 we did with Alec Morrison discussing that and what's going on with the Georgia Revs. That's all my notes before Thunder knocks us off the air.
Yeah, I'm going to go bunker down and probably there's no sense in a Thunder shirt with Gwen. She doesn't ever care about that, but sometimes you have to literally hold her down so she doesn't lose her mind, which she's doing right now because it's rough. So thanks, everybody, hanging out with us this week. Chris Ashley, yes, your Greenville FC is very excited right now. You'll be able to see that from last year on the My Cujo platform from the NPSL. Glad we can be a part of it. Glad we can spread the word. Glad we can try to be entertaining in a crazy week. Hopefully we'll have some good news on scheduling for MLS next week. Hopefully we'll have some good news on USL League One for next week. Hopefully we'll have some updates on USL Championship, NISA, after their announcements about coming back. Lots of stuff moving. We'll try to keep you posted as best we can. We'll try to break it all down so you know all of the different components of all of it as we go. So stay tuned to the podcast network this weekend for some additional content. We've got some additional 1v1s. Please go listen to the one that I did earlier this week with Bottle Share.
Yes.
With Christopher Glenn. It's a great story. I'd known a little bit about it. Didn't know all the different things that Bottle Share does in their communities and in the craft beer and beverage industry for people who need it. Christopher's stories incredibly inspiring, and go check that out and check out Bottle Share's website and their social media platforms for ways, if you're a beer fan, if you're a craft beer fan, especially local stuff, they do a lot for the industry. So check them out and support if you can. Wild Heaven just made a big announcement too on a beer, one of their new beers that they're doing that's going to be working with the H.J. Russell Company and doing some things in the West End where one of their breweries is located. So lots of groups, lots of people that we're affiliated with trying to do things in their communities. Do what you can this weekend to benefit your communities. Think local, or act local, think global, and do what you can. And we'll be talking about all of that next week. Thanks for hanging out with us. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.